Gary, alcoholic. Well, welcome to the Saturday night recovery group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a working step meeting, and we'll meet for approximately 1.5 hours with a break. Out of respect for others, we request that you refrain from cross-talking or commenting while others are sharing, and hopefully stay muted while anybody else is sharing. Let us open the meeting with a moment of silence, just to remember those of us that are still in and out of the rooms and suffering, and then we'll follow that by the set-aside prayer. Great, thank you. So God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, recovery, you, and the 12 steps, that I might have an open mind and a new experience. Amen. And welcome, Danny. I'm assuming you're probably working tonight and trying to listen in as you work.
No, I'm cat sitting, so I'm feeding the cat and then I'll be at the AA meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Anyway, tonight we're working on part 2 of step 11. And just as a reminder, step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And the focus last meeting was on, the necessity for prayer and meditation in an effort to improve our conscious contact with God. And for me, the prayer side of it, one of the things I was told was that prayer can be as simple as one word, just thanks. And for me, it just helps increase that move towards a attitude of gratitude, like making yourself a foundation of gratitude for the small things in life that are, that we sometimes take for granted. And also, when I got into this room, one of the things that I really was craving and was missing because of my predilection towards isolation, I isolated a lot so that I could drink the way I wanted to, and people would leave me alone to drink the way I wanted to. And I also thought that way I wasn't harming people around me. But one of the things that you lack when you do that is conscious contact, whether it's with the higher power or just with other people. It says in our literature that one of our biggest problems as alcoholics is an inability to form effective relationships with other people. And by working through the steps, we actually start to change that. And step 11 is part of that process to keep working on enhancing our conscious contact. And for me, when I think about conscious contact, it's not necessarily hearing the voice of God in my head, but for me, what happens is I start, as it says in step 9, start to intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. Like my conscious starts to come to the forefront. My intuition starts to come to the forefront. I get to actually understand and read, my own body signal flags, if you want to call it that. Something doesn't feel right. It's not sitting right with me. There's something wrong that needs to be changed. And we do that through step 10, correcting what's wrong with our day. But part of it is just establishing that conscious contact, letting people, like some people say that, God is within all of us. And to me, that's where your intuition and conscience comes into play. Anyway, tonight we are going to continue on that journey, and we're starting on the second part of that. And that is the part of the step that deals with prayer for a knowledge of His will. This knowledge will bring us the proper use of our will, which seems to be tied up in self-denial and willing service to others. So with that note, I'm going to turn it over to Jill to start us off tonight. We're going to start, I believe, by reading the second part of step 11 in the Little Red Book, and then go through the key points of it. And then we're going to move on to step 11, part of the step 11 in the 12 by 12.
Yeah.
flow for you there, Jill?
Yep. So, yeah, you ready for me to roll on?
Yep.
So, thank you, Gary. My name's Jill. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic and addict. And last session, so we know that we're breaking step 11 down into 3 parts. Part 1 is improving our conscious contact with God. And a couple of key points that from last week to highlight is the word conscious. Okay, so we're talking about, and it's good that we, in here we've got tonight, everybody's done a set of steps and is aware of what the steps are. So what we're taking from this is that our conscious contact with God is infinite. And this is also about the rebalancing. We talked a lot about complacency, about, oh, this is good enough where I'm at in my program. When I start to think, oh, I've done the steps and I've got this, that's a warning sign. So step 11 says that we can improve our conscious contact with God. And so I'm always evolving into Jill 2.0, Amy 2.0, Laura 2.0, Ron 2.0, Annie 2.0, Gary 2.0, whatever your name is. You can move to a deeper spiritual connection as you use this step. And the purpose, as we discussed it last week, was a rebalancing. And it said we need endless experience. So think about that. Infinite experience in the practice. So the practice is something we do every day of unselfish prayer. Not, Santa Claus, I want this for Christmas, or I want you to do this. And tonight we're going to do a deep dive into what prayers look like, what our knowledge of his will for us is. And so what his will for us might be could be a lot different than what I'm praying for if I'm still in self. So that's where we're going to go tonight with this. Prayer and meditation are the principal means we in the program use for an improved conscious contact with our higher power. Many members of AA are easily distracted and lose sight of priorities. Often we do the sort of sinking Titanic prayer, which is only in an emergency, reaching out, God save me. Just as our bodies suffer with the deprivation of food and water, so our minds and emotions suffer with the deprivation of prayer and meditation. We can go backwards, right? We got to flex our God muscle, or we can go back to the 1.0 version of ourselves. The Big Book uses the phrase quiet time rather than the word meditation. It is beneficial to set aside time during the day, usually in the morning, when we eliminate all distractions and concentrate and enjoy the sense of well-being shared with our higher power. So that was talking about, the improving your conscious contact with God, getting more into the routine. Now, part 2 of this one is knowledge of his will for us. That's God's will for us at any given moment. Is that we experience and enjoy our full potential, our 2.0 and growing version every day of our lives, every 24 hours. And this is really something I'm learning. It's not about, I explain this to kids that I'm teaching that are getting a lot of pressure to be Olympic athletes. And I say to them, if your only measure of worth is going to be a gold medal, one person every 4 years gets to stand on that podium from all the countries in the world. And if that is the only thing that is going to make you feel worthwhile, you're attached to a result, you're attached to a goal, and it's not in your will anyway, it's in God's will. What is in our realm is our full potential every day. So enjoy the process. If you're not enjoying the training and the journey, that's not God's will for us, because it is then that we are in sync with God. In brief, God wants one thing and one thing only, that we be happy. And it says that's exactly what we're on about tonight. It is said that we are never burdened beyond our strength, that God will always give us the strength to cope. This step tells us that God wants even more for us. So he wants us to be our infinite 2.0 self. That's God's will for us, that we go as far on this spiritual journey as we are willing to open ourselves to receive. What appears as a burden to us is only because of our tunnel vision, right? What we are being offered is an opportunity to grow, to expand our capacity for happiness. Think about that. Like, this is a whole new way of me looking at this. My higher power wants me to be happy. And if I can let go of what my bodily wishes are, in this body that I'm a spiritual being in a human body. And if I can let go of the corporeal, the human desires and the greeds and such, I can move more and more into being a spiritual being. And so my capacity for happiness is endless if I align it with my wish for the higher power for me. Prayer and meditation is another discipline requiring commitment and consistent practice. Once established as a habit, it reaps great rewards. Okay. So, in closing, this is a discipline. So, it's something we do every day. It requires commitment, consistent practice, like faith without works is dead. And then it promises here, if you get in the habit of doing it, you're just going to have endless rewards. And with that, we go forward and start reading from the Little Red Book. So, Ron, I don't know if you can share screen or somebody can put the Little Red Book up there. We're starting
Just
on
while
page
Ron's-
109 tonight.
Just while Ron's finding that, there's just one thing I wanted to mention.
No, I've got it right here. I can find it. I was just doing something else. I'm going to stay till 7:30. I just doing some text.
Okay,
Whereabouts on the red book is it? Which
page
page?
109.
So
Go
which
ahead,
page
Gary.
is this?
It's the second part, is the paragraph on page 109 that says the second part.
Well, I've got it up right now. What page is it? I don't have
109.
pages. I don't have any page numbers on it.
Oh,
And keep going because I just saw the third part. So keep going up because there's the third part right there at the bottom of that page. So
Okay,
you need to go
up,
backward.
go this way.
Backwards. I saw the third part. Wait, hold on.
yeah, treatment
The
is the
treatment?
third part.
Okay, keep going up.
Go
Keep
more.
going. Top of the page. Yep. Do you see it yet, Jill?
Uh,
The page numbers are different. Like I understand what he's
oh,
saying.
hang on. Go back to the word treatment. I'm sorry. Go to where it said treatment. It's 2 paragraphs under that, the all capitalized word treatment.
There you
There
go.
it is. Okay, there we go.
There
Oh yeah,
it's-
there's the second part right there.
Okay.
Yeah, can you see that? Everybody see it?
I'm pointing it to it on the screen.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention something about, it said that God's aim for us is to be happy. And it's like everything else in this program, I had to figure out what happiness really meant. Because when I got in here, my idea of happiness was instant gratification, whatever I could get right now. And, the next shiny toy would keep me happy for 5 minutes, or the next new stereo, or the next whatever, might provide a little bit of happiness, or so I thought, for a few minutes, but it was never lasting. And what I discovered in way working through the steps and in this program is that happiness isn't the destination. It's not something that I shoot for. Happiness is a byproduct of the journey. And the journey is involving myself in service. And when I'm helping other people, that's when I get true happiness. It brings a sense of well-being and contentedness and self-esteem, and a real sense of happiness and joy. So I had to really come to understand what happiness was before I could really appreciate that was part of, what God is looking for in my life. He wants us to be happy, wants us to be fulfilled. And that comes from being involved in service, and, whether it's service to your family or service to other alcoholics or service to your neighbors, or in whatever capacity, that's where the real reward comes from. And I just wanted to put that in there.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, so who wants to start us off with our reading tonight? We're starting halfway down that page where it says the second part. So if you're marking up your Little Red Book, we're going to this is so step 11 is broken into 3 parts. And in part 1, that we dealt with last week, there were 6 key issues, key principles, okay? Key ideas, we went up to number 6. So yeah, exactly. So number 6 is what we ended with. Tonight we're starting with number 7. But this is the first key idea for part 2, the part 2 being a prayer for the knowledge of his will. And it jumps, the first key idea, number 7, comes right at the beginning of what we're going to start reading. So for the sake of flow, I'm going to read this first paragraph and then turn it over to someone to read. So it starts off, and I'm reading now halfway down the page on page 109. The second part of this step deals with prayer for a knowledge of his will. So if you go back to step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to prove our conscious contact with God as we understood him. That was the first part of step 11. Now, praying only for his knowledge of his will. So we're asking this question, how do we know what his will is for us? This knowledge will bring up the proper use of our will. Okay? As deemed in this program, self-will used properly. And this, it says, seems to be tied up in self-denial. Now, what does self-denial mean? It's 2 words that we know, self and denial, to say no. So what we're doing here, in simple terms, is we're saying no to the self and yes to God. No to Jill, yes to HP. And then willing service to others. So those 2 things, it says the questions that have repeatedly confronted members are, well, how do I know what is God's will? How am I to know it from my own will? That line, what is God's will? How am I to know it from my own will? Is key idea number 7. So we're praying for a knowledge of his will. And it says, if we stay in the moment, we will intuitively know what the very next thing to do, and that is all that is important. Listening for what God's will for us is an ongoing practice throughout our recovery. Now, what it doesn't say at this point is that we're going to get a teletype telling us exactly what we're to do. What we're doing at this point is think about it as dialing up a connection that you're trying to reach, a clear line or an internet connection, and it keeps dropping out, and then you finally get one that's stable. It's a daily, conscious, and deliberate connection with our higher power. Okay, so who wants to kick us off with reading from In AA God's Will? Bottom of 109.
I can
Laura,
read a little.
alcoholic addict.
So
In
Laura,
AA's God's will for the alcoholic is sobriety. Other aspects embrace conscious contact with him, faith, prayer, honesty, and humility. But day by day, sobriety is the first essential of his will for us.
So just stop right there, because this is what our higher power wants with us. If we're not sober, we can't do any of the rest of this. So the starting point is our higher power wants us to be sober. Carry on, Laura.
Members should quickly realize AA philosophy is not a religion. AA is a practical therapy for arresting the disease of alcoholism. The practice of the 12 steps is no way conflicts with any religion. It does not ask for divided loyalties any more than medical therapy and treatment of disease.
Okay, just stop 1 second there. Notice that they're using the word therapy twice. What is therapy? So this is AA defined. It is therapy. Therapy is a course of treatment. It is a healing. And it says in the big book, we are never cured. What we are doing in these steps is with this step, is we are in a course of therapy. Okay, carry on.
The will of God would be easier understood and executed if there were no one in the world to consider but ourselves.
So this is going to be this whole next page, and you need to listen to it like this. This is from the perspective of whether it's just, think about now, if you didn't have to consider anyone else in the world, These are the it's only about me paragraphs. Go ahead, Lara.
We would not lie to ourselves as we do under the present circumstances. Cheating would not only be unnecessary, it would be impossible. We would not commit adultery, and there would be no excuse or occasion for leading a double life. Drunkenness under such circumstances would not harm anyone but ourselves. Moral values would be entirely changed, making sin impossible unless we denied God completely. The nature of our prayer would have little resemblance to the prayer we now offer. The chief need would be we would have for God then would be that of personal contact, of offset loneliness to avert danger, to cure sickness, and to establish security in the world hereafter.
Okay, I had to read this a couple times because basically what this is saying is if the world's only me, then none of this other stuff matters, okay? So this, we don't have to worry about affairs. There's no one to have commit adultery. There's no one to have, there's no boundaries, right? It's only about me. Cheating, I can't just cheat myself. There's no one else to cheat. So it's saying if it's only about you, but, go ahead, Lara.
Such self-centered living would soon become boring beyond belief. We would long for human companionship, someone to share our lives with, to hear our tales of woe, and to minister to. Our successes and failures would mean little unless we could share them. Human happiness stems from faith in God, from human association, and from a desire to live and let live. That is the way God made us, and we cannot fulfill our destiny otherwise. Fortunately, we are not alone in this universe, but are one of millions that are entirely dependent upon each other for the necessities of life and the peace of mind that makes living worthwhile.
Okay, hang on there. So I'm blown away by this paragraph because what it's saying here is that God wants me to interact with other people. This is human association is our nature. We are social beings. But if you're an alcoholic like me, you've taken isolation to a whole new level because I wanted you to not interfere with my drinking. And my disease, when it has a grip on me, takes me away from my godly purpose of wanting to interact and help my fellow human being. So in fact, alcohol is like a satanic force pulling me away from my higher power. It's the antithesis of my higher power. If I look at that, it's like the devil, if you want to use that image, calling to me, taking me into isolation, taking me away from God's gift of happiness by being a social creature. So now that gets us right into key idea number 8, which is the whole next paragraph. Therefore, we deduce that our understanding of God's will starts with surrender of our wills to Him and with charitable, loving acts of service to others. We cannot live unto ourselves alone. I love the direction here. This is saying, Jill, you're not meant to be alone. Oh, well, that was news to me because it was certainly my goal to isolate and stay away from you as much as possible. And now it's saying, if I want to know true happiness, my higher power intended me to mix with other people. So the question, if we were sitting and chatting about this, is in what ways does alcoholism produce negative, paranoid, and self-sabotage thinking? The more I isolated, the more that I fantasized what other people were thinking. And in fact, they weren't thinking about me at all. So this is really an important key idea, the charitable, loving acts of service to others. But first, we need to surrender our will and accept that we're part of the herd. I'm part of your herd. I'm part of your family. Okay, who wants to pick up on our spiritual awakening?
I can read. Oh, I was trying to move the screen. That's so funny. Sorry. Our spiritual awakening is contingent upon our personal change. It results from renouncing self-will, from admitting our wrongs, from charitable deeds, and benefit others at the expense of our own time and money, and for making amends. It was only while engaged in thought and activity of this nature that we keenly felt the presence of God or came close to the knowledge of his will. The answer to our prayers for such understanding comes with the least effort we get. The answer to our prayers for such understanding comes with the least effort when we are on a spiritual mission of help and service, when our conscience guides us, and when we forgive and feel gratitude. Our efforts in this direction, aided by faith and prayer for guidance, will bring us near to God.
Okay, this one's loaded. So our spiritual awakening, where does that sound familiar, guys? That's the beginning of step 12. Okay? We get a spiritual awakening. It says it's contingent. What does contingent mean? It means you're not going to get it. It's a condition upon our personality change. We have to undergo a psychic change if we're going to have a spiritual awakening. It results from renouncing. What does the word renounce mean? It means to formally declare or abandon your title, right, or possession of something. So this is when we stand up and say, okay, I'm not just saying I'm not in self-will anymore. I'm formally declaring, I'm making a very positive action here. I am renouncing my self-will. And it says it results, and then it goes through the other things that we do in our steps that give us this psychic change, admitting our wrongs. And then it talks about charitable deeds that benefit others. You know, at the expense of our own time and money, we're clearing our side of the street, we're making amends. It was only while engaged in thought and activity of this nature that we keenly feel the presence of God and we come close to the knowledge of his will. So it's only when we're caring for others that we get close to the presence of God. And it's only in doing so that we become close to the knowledge of his will for us. And what this is saying is that as I serve to help in this spiritual program, I'm getting closer and closer to my higher power. The more my motives and my activity, that my actions follow my motives of helping you or helping others, the more aligned I am with my higher power's purpose. And what I get is I get to feel closer to my higher power. So the last sentence of that paragraph on the bottom of page 111, is the next key idea, number 9. Our efforts in this direction, aided by faith and prayer for guidance, will bring us near to God. And this key idea, here's the quote. Just as the disease of alcoholism is progressive, so is my recovery. I must take the time to examine the progress I have made, and I must stop and give myself the credit I deserve. So what this is saying, so if you look at key idea 9, what I just read is the suggestion for self-study or group discussion. This is something I did not do. I never, early in my starting to work with others, I felt like I was such a bad person. I was so full of shame that I just started doing a lot of this stuff and still focusing on what was wrong with me and not pausing to say, you know, like, remember in here, I'm helping my sister, you know, or I'm leading a group, or I'm turning up at a prison. And we need to pause and give ourselves credit for the things that we are doing, even by participating in our recovery here. This is what this is talking about. When our intentions are, you know, you're learning this, but your duty and obligation for a spiritual experience is then to pass it on in step 12. So that's why we're getting so deep into this. So again, it's saying the faith and prayer for guidance will bring us closer to God, and so will these acts. Okay, let's carry on now from daily practice of the Alcoholics Program.
Jill, just before we do that,
Yep.
I just want to do something too. just because it's this time of year. I'm older than probably most of the people in here. Maybe Ron might be aware of this too, but there's a movie out there from 1946 called It's a Wonderful Life. I'm not sure if anybody's seen it, but if you watch this movie, it basically is a man that is struggling with exactly this issue. You know, he doesn't appreciate, he can't see what he's been doing, all the good he's been doing in the world. And he just figures maybe the world would be a better place without him. So he actually gets a wish granted and gets to see what life would be like in his community without him in the picture. You know, it really kind of ties into what we've just been reading about. So if you get a chance to watch it, it's a great movie for this time of year. It's a Christmas movie, but you know, it's kind of like this book. It was done in 1946, but the message is timeless. So,
Oh, thank you for that, Gary. That's going to be on my watch list.
it's Jimmy Stewart too, so you can't go
Jimmy
wrong.
Stewart, I love it. Okay, let's start with daily practice, Amy.
I know it sounds crazy, but to go with what Gary just said, you know, between my brother-in-law committing suicide and my friend dying in those funerals, like the only people that shared at my brother-in-law's funeral were random people in the community that he just came in contact, and they just were so shocked. They had to come and just share with the family how much those people, how he touched them every day and how sad they were going to be that he wouldn't be there. And all I could think is, I wish he could have seen that, because he thought, you know, whatever he thought, but like these people, I was just in tears by just random people. The family had no idea who they were. And they were like, oh, he came into my store every day and got a coffee. He was such a delight. And you're like, oh my gosh, all these people loved him. But he didn't see that, you know? Anyways, okay.
No,
sorry.
but that's a
On the
good
long
point,
shot.
because I think we're all pretty hard on ourselves. And that's something I'm learning to do. If somebody says thank you or I've made a difference, I used to just shrug it off and keep talking because I was a bit embarrassed or I didn't believe it. And now I read the texts and I read the messages and I'm like, yeah, Jill, you're changing. You're turning into the 2.0 version of yourself that your mother, you know, that I want to be more like my mother was, you know, and I can see John said, oh my goodness, he said, you're even starting to laugh like she did. But I mean, it's a good thing, right? We're turning into a higher spiritual version of our yourself. Anyway, carry on.
That's funny. Daily practice of Alcoholics Anonymous program keeps us close to the spiritual and physical needs of humanity. There is much work to be done in rehabilitation. As we interest ourselves in the work and carry it on, we are, to the best of our ability, gaining a knowledge of God's will by the practice of faith, honesty, and unselfish service.
Okay, so there you go. That last sentence. We are, to the best of our ability, gaining a knowledge of God's will by the practice of faith, honesty, and unselfish service. That is key idea number 10. And notice it says there, best of our ability. It's progress, not perfection. And that we're gaining a knowledge of God's will. It doesn't mean we know it. Notice all these things say that we're getting nearer. And it says by also, again, it uses the word practice. That's an action. Practice is an action. Faith, honesty, and then it uses the qualifier to service of unselfish. If you're just doing service to make yourself feel better, that's not really service. Service is unselfish when it may be inconvenient, as Gary knows, many a night through the winter storms to open up the Whistler Medical Center. It's unselfish service. Okay, carry on.
Hold on, I'm gonna hit.
It's the next two paragraphs and then we're done.
Okay. As active members, we are trying to carry the will of God into our daily lives. In doing so, we may encounter criticism either at home or by fellow members of AA. We are not discouraged by such criticism as long as our motives are sincere and constructive. If we are wrong, we admit it and seek further understanding from God. We keep trying. We continue to have faith in our work and prayers. Sometimes criticism of someone's action is in order. If so, it can be constructive nature and not the results of resentment or envy. Our purpose is to conform to the will of God, never to oppose it. Oh, I love this with the daily reflections for the 24th and 25th. goes right with all that.
So this is the alignment paragraph, okay? We're trying to get in alignment with our higher power's will for us. So this is basically saying that you can get criticized for doing this work, but look at your motive. As long as your underlying purpose is sincere and constructive, that's all we're asking here. And if you get called on something within the program it's talking about here or in life generally, and you know that you've gotten further away from a sincere and constructive motive, we're wrong, we admit it, and then we try to get closer to our understanding from God what our purpose was. How would I have done better? And that this is an ongoing process. And then it says we have continue to have faith in our work and prayer. In other words, we're a work in progress. And then this last little bit, it says we're going to have conflict. This doesn't mean that we're not going to have conflict or criticism, but what we want to do is always bring it back to conforming to the will of God. Right? Always look at your motives and then say, am I aligning myself with what I think my higher power's purpose is for me? If I am, that's good enough for me because I'm instructed here never to oppose it. That's the last four words there. Never oppose God's will for you. That's a pretty clear direction to me. Okay, so that's it for reading out of the Little Red Book. And then Gary, I don't know how you want to segue over to this, but we're jumping into the 12 by 12 on step 11 because this is mind blowing.
No, I think we're good to just jump right straight into it. So
Okay, so who wants to start the reading? So we're getting right into what God's will for us. We're on page.
Do you want us to pull it up? Because I think
Yeah.
that app.
Has everybody got it?
Page 102.
Yeah.
I can start it off.
Sure.
Here. And I'm assuming where you're starting is like, now what if prayer?
Yeah, that's just defining prayer and stuff, but that is the start for 11. So we're going to go from there. It's knowledge of his will comes in the middle of that paragraph.
Yep. Now, what if prayer? Prayer is the raising of heart and mind to God. And in this sense, it includes meditation. How may we go about it? And how does it fit in with the meditation? Prayer is commonly understood as a petition to God. Having opened our channel as best we can, we try to ask for those right things of which we and others are in greatest need. And we think that the whole range of our needs is well defined by that part of step 11, which says, knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. A request for this fits in any part of the day.
So I just want to stop 1 second there. Petition. So in this 12 by 12 dictionary, wherever it went, you can get this PDF or have it. It's really good to have this available to look up words. I've done this one for us. Petition is a formal or solemn request to a superior authority. So we're petitioning here to the superior authority, which is our higher power, to ask for those right things of which we and others are in the greatest need. So this is where I'm petitioning to my higher power for direction. And then this is where it says, step 11 says, knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Okay, carry on. In the morning.
Yep. I was also going to say, just, I think we mentioned before, but, even if you don't get all of this program, if you read through the materials, your vocabulary expands dramatically, through reading the big book and all its compendiums. In the morning, we think of the hours to come. Perhaps we think of our day's work and the chances it may afford us to be useful and helpful, or of some special problem that it may bring. Possibly today we will see a continuation of a serious and as of yet unresolved problem left over from yesterday. Our immediate temptation will be to ask for specific solutions to specific problems and for the ability to ask to help other people as we have already thought they should be helped. In that case, we are asking God to do it our way. Therefore, we ought to consider each request carefully to see what its real merit is. Even so, when making specific requests, it will be well to add each one of them this qualification, if it be thy will. We ask simply that throughout the day, God place in us the best understanding of his will that we can have for that day, and that we be given the grace by which we may carry it out.
You know, this paragraph, this is brilliant because this takes me back to this part. Ask for specific solutions to specific problems. What is that? That's going back to being the director. First of all, we're identifying what we think the problem is, and then we've already have figured out what the solution is. So we're asking for God to basically grant us a wish of self-will. And that's why the really important thing here is when it says real merit. What is the real merit of my prayer? What's my motive in my prayer? If I'm asking something for my husband, what's my real motive? Is it because I want something from him for myself to make my life better? Or is it really in his best interest? Who am I to play God for him? And then it says, even so, when making a specific request, we also have to add the condition subsequent, this is called in law. But if that's not going to happen, you do it your way, God. Every time. Then we're detached from asking specific solutions to specific problems. I may come in thinking I know the answer because I'm real sure of myself, but I have to add the condition, but hey, God, if I haven't got this right, do it your way. And I'm okay with that. So that's a super important one. And then I've highlighted, can I turn it over? If it be thy will. That's really the test here. Can I really turn it over? And I have to ask throughout the day, place me in the best understanding of your will, because I don't know. And when I start to get giving orders and directions and thinking I can micromanage your life or somebody else's, I have to stop and remind myself, I'm agitated, I'm doubtful, because why? The show's not going off as I thought it was written the way I wrote it. So this is really a big one. I have to turn it over to God. Have to turn it over. Okay, let's carry on.
Well, I was going to say, you also have to be ready to receive whatever it is, God's will is for us. I remember, praying for patience, to increase my patience, tolerance, and understanding. And the next thing I know, I've got somebody in my life, whether it's a sponsee or somebody, who really tests my patience, my tolerance, and my understanding. And the best way to grow is at the speed of pain, right? So,
Did you see me put my hand up?
You just don't necessarily see the answer until it's, until in hindsight you start to understand that you got exactly what you asked for. Yeah. Anyway, as the day goes on, we can pause where situations must be met and decisions made and renew the simple request, thy will, not mine, be done. If at these points our emotional disturbance happens to be great, we will more surely keep our balance provided we remember to repeat to ourselves a particular prayer or phrase that has appealed to us in our reading or meditation. Just saying it over and over will often enable us to clear a channel choked with anger, fear, frustration, or misunderstanding, and permit us to return to the surest help of all, our search for God's will, not our own, in the moment of stress. At these critical moments, if we remind ourselves that it is better to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved, we will be following the intent of step 11.
And you might recognize this part of the St. Francis prayer there. So basically, this is a recalibration paragraph. There's several, clear a channel. The word channel is used a couple times here. And I think the analogy of if you're ancient like I am and you remember the old radios where you used to have to tune the dial before the channel actually comes in loud and clear, or it's like Amy driving home and she gets into a garbled spot. I keep trying this until I get the clear message, and that this is a searching for God's will, not our own, in the moment of stress. And it's better to be comforted than to be comforted. These are all St. Francis prayer, and we can go back into that at another time. But if you haven't read the St. Francis prayer, that's where you go with this one. That's an excerpt. Okay, we've got 2.5 pages left.
I was also going to say that, where it talks about repeating the same prayer over and over again, just to kind of help clear the channels for you. For me, at the beginning, it was always the Serenity Prayer. I don't know about anybody else, but that one just, I would recite it hundreds of times during the day when I was still trying to get, my feet on the ground in this thing. And it really helped. It started, I didn't necessarily think of it as a prayer. I thought of more of a checklist, but, just thinking through that made me stop and change my thinking and get grounded and at least pause. So I like that. And back to the reading, it says, of course, it is reasonable and understandable that the question is often asked, why can't we take a specific and troubling dilemma straight to God and in prayer secure from Him sure and definite answers? This can be done, but it has hazards. We've seen AAs ask with much earnestness and faith for God's explicit guidance on matters ranging all the way from a shattering domestic or financial crisis to correcting a minor personal fault like tardiness. Quite often, however, the thoughts that may seem to come from God are not answers at all. They seem to be well-intentioned, unconscious rationalizations. The AA, or indeed any man who tries to run his life rigidly by this kind of prayer, by this self-serving demand of God for replies, is a particularly disconcerting individual. To any questioning or criticism of his actions, he instantly proffers his reliance upon prayer for guidance in all matters, great or small. He may have forgotten the possibility that his own wishful thinking and the human tendency to rationalize have distorted his so-called guidance. With all the best intentions, he tends to force his own will into all sorts of situations and problems with the comfortable assurance that he is acting under God's specific direction. Under such an illusion, he can, of course, create great havoc without in the least intending it.
Okay, so I call these the playing God paragraph, because basically, if I'm asking directly for myself, I can delude myself into getting the answer. My ego wants to be right, and I may be going back into self-will. I mean, you may have heard people that tell you they're, and you wonder after you speak to them, well, I don't see the connection. And they said, oh yeah, God told me to do this, or I'm seeing signs, this is the way I'm meant to go. And this is exactly how I'm intended to do this work. It's unconscious rationalization. It's not accompanied by the however thy will be done. When we start play, and I've done this myself. I've been very self-serving. I've been asking, for myself to have certain results, or that somebody else gets a certain result. That's my what this paragraph is saying is, it may be well-intentioned. You may want something good for someone else, but is it God's will or is it my will? And again, this takes us back to the motives of what we're asking for. So it's wishful thinking. And then it goes further on 104. And then it says, then you can end up forcing your own will and dressing it up to sound like God. Then you're playing God. So we really have to be careful with our prayer, again, that we're looking back at that wonderful word, one of my favorite words that goes all through these steps, what is my motive? And I have to be rigorously honest with myself. Why am I praying for this? Why am I praying for this person? Is it for their good? Is it for God's will? Or is it for Jill's subconscious desire? Okay, who hasn't read? Annie, are you in a position to read?
Not
There's
at the
also
moment, no.
Okay, alrighty. Ron, have you read? You haven't, have you? We also fall? Or do you want to
No, but
pass?
I didn't really want to. I'd rather
Okay.
listen.
Okay, carry on. Gary, with We Also Fall, or whoever, and then we'll switch up for the next page.
Sorry, weren't we at in AA, or did I? Oh,
We
okay,
also
right.
fall into another similar temptation.
I was also going to mention just before we did that, on the self-rationalization and the self-directed prayers, it reminds me of a country song that I heard that really resonated. says that your prayers will always be answered, but sometimes the answer is no.
Yes.
I just love that idea, that it's taken me out of the picture. It's not what I think, it's what my higher power is trying to tell me.
I like that.
So we also fall into another similar temptation. We form ideas as to what we think God's will is for other people. We say to ourselves, this one ought to be cured of his fatal malady, or that one ought to be relieved of his emotional pain. And we pray for these specific things. Such prayers, of course, are fundamentally good acts, but often they are based on a supposition that we know God's will for the person for whom we pray. This means that side by side with an earnest prayer, there can be a certain amount of presumption and conceit in us. It is in AA's experience that, particularly in these cases, we ought to pray that God's will, whatever it is, be done for others as well as for ourselves. In AA, we have found that the actual good results of prayer are beyond question. They are matters of knowledge and experience. All of those who have persisted have found strength not ordinarily their own. They have found wisdom beyond their usual capability, and they have increasingly found a peace of mind which can stand firm in the face of certain difficult circumstances.
So I just want to pause there. So strength not only your own. I found that to be true, and it's a gift of prayer. I find I'm getting guidance in direct proportion to the amount of self I'm letting go. And that's been a real change for me, because I'm now constantly editing my prayers. Now I've read this and understand this, because my prayers have to be, they're getting more clear, and they're also getting very quickly answered when they're the right prayers, what I'm finding for other people. And it's in direct proportion to how I'm letting go of the result. I have no expectations. I check my motive. I'm sure the motive is clean. And it's really quite, this is a gift of prayer, and I'm experiencing it. So I'm here to tell you, as one who's never consciously prayed until recently, because Gary knows the story. When I came in here almost 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it is, I didn't have a higher power. I was sarcastic. I was rebellious. And I sure didn't have any connection to a higher power or even want to consider what one might be. Now I'm having the most profound conversations. But what I love about this stuff that we're studying is I'm getting directions. It's not just saying, I used to hate it with my first sponsor. The answer to every question I asked was, go pray on it. Well, what if you don't know how to pray? What if you don't know what prayer means? What if you've never had a conscious contact with God? How do I do that? And this is telling me exactly how. I love that. Okay, I digressed.
I think it's on point. We discover that we do receive guidance for our lives just about to the extent that we stop making demands upon God to give it to us on order and on our terms. Almost any experienced AA will tell how his affairs have taken remarkable and unexpected turns for the better as he tried to improve his conscious contact with God. He will also report that out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seems heavy or even unjust, new lessons for living were learned, new resources of courage were uncovered, and finally, inescapably, the conviction came that God does move in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform.
Okay, I'm going to be really nerdy here and tell you where I went with this. Okay, first of all, this is the step 11 promise, in that our affairs are taking remarkable and unexpected turns for the better as we improve our conscious contact with God. We've acknowledged, at least that's our experiences, we're getting closer. Think about this now, for those of you who's had loss. Out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seemed heavy or even unjust, new lessons for living. For every loss, there's a new lesson for life. And that we are given a new resource of courage that gets uncovered. So my comfort zone gets expanded when I'm made uncomfortable. If I truly feel the emotion of grief and sobriety, I expand what I can handle. And I can look back upon these things and see that God does move in mysterious ways. So where does that come from? Christian hymn in 1773 by William Coupel, just after he'd suffered with serious bouts of trying to kill himself. And then he wrote this and he recovered. And the final line of this hymn is, wait for it, God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. I have to trust that. So all we've been talking about this evening is getting nearer and closer to our higher power, because God, your higher power, this infinite source, at least for me, this source knows what I don't know. I just want to get closer to it because I'm excited as I get closer and all these things get uncovered for me about how much fun and happiness, to tie it back into what we're talking about, when I help others and I get out of self. So this is the full process of living sober with human emotions like grief. It's okay to grieve and suffer, and it's not for us to understand immediately, but our higher power will make it apparent to us. More will be revealed. And so I think this is a very powerful paragraph. Okay, we've got 2 more paragraphs.
I was going to also say one thing that we need to remember as we're doing this too is that we are human beings, and sometimes we fail, and like I say, we learn from pain and have to go back and try it again. But I've also heard success is just getting up one more time than you fell down. I love that concept. All this should be very encouraging news for those who recoil from prayer because they don't believe in it, or because they feel themselves cut off from God's help and direction. All of us, without exception, pass through times when we can pray only with the greatest exertion of will. Occasionally, we go even further than this. We are seized with a rebellion so sickening that we simply won't pray. When these things happen, we should not think too ill of ourselves. We should simply resume prayer as soon as we can, doing what we know to be good for us. Perhaps one of the greatest rewards of meditation and prayer is the sense of belonging that comes to us. We no longer live in a completely hostile world. We are no longer lost and frightened and purposeless. The moment we catch even a glimpse of God's will, the moment we begin to see truth, justice, and love as the real and the eternal things in life, we are no longer deeply disturbed by the seeming evidence to the contrary that surrounds us in purely human affairs. We know that God lovingly watches over us. We know that when we turn to him, all will be well with us here and hereafter.
Okay, so I call this the 7 rewards. Okay, and I'm going to break them down for you. This is a really heavy paragraph. This is where we find our real purpose. Perhaps one of the greatest rewards, so this is saying right here, this is going to be the rewards if we get into this practice of prayer and meditation. 1, and tell me if this is not true for you, a sense of belonging. Isn't that what we found here? A sense of belonging. 2, we no longer live in a completely hostile world. I've got friends in here. I've got people I can turn to. I don't feel like it's me against the world anymore. We are no longer lost and frightened and purposeless. Absolutely. Absolutely. Reflect on what you're doing in here and the meetings you're going to and how you're participating in your recovery and others. You've got a purpose. The moment we catch even a glimpse of God's will, the moment we begin to see truth, justice, and love as the real and eternal things in life. 4, we are no longer deeply disturbed by all the seeming evidence to the contrary so that's just the contrary of God's will. So we're not deeply disturbed when things come to us that are purely human affairs. I watch the news now and it doesn't bother me the way it used to. Right? It's a purely human affair. 5, I know I know that God lovingly watches over me. Take each of these 7 things and personalize it. Instead of saying, we know that God lovingly watches over us, you can say out loud and personal today, I know that my higher power is lovingly, not just watching over me, but watching over me with love. And I feel that today. And then the 6th reward, I know that when I turn to my higher power, all will be well with me, with you, for us. I know that today. And for the present, I know that. But here's the last one, the real clanger, and the hereafter. That's where I make peace with my mortality. Because I know that my higher power is lovingly watching over me, over you, over all of us for now and for eternity. And that's when I can really let go of life, right? That's when I start to believe in the hereafter. I don't feel attached to any particular result. And I'm excited about this because I'm only just beginning to really understand I have been given this reward. I'm no longer afraid of dying. And I'm no longer afraid of anyone else dying either, because I now feel the lovingly presence of something guiding. And even though I may not understand it, and even though things may still hurt me, and even though I can still go back into self-will, when I get closer and closer to this connection with my higher power, and you guys hear me, I do it all the time in the meeting, thy will be done, not Jill's. Like, God, get in here before Jill does. And as I move more and more into that constant conversation that is guiding me, I'm happy. And that's exactly what we're talking about tonight. And my higher power wants me to be happy. And my higher power wants you to be happy. And your higher power, as we've summarized tonight, wants you to be happy. Because all too often, and this is just on a personal note, but I feel I want to spend 60 seconds on it. The depression we hear about all the time, the more airtime we give to depression, the more it grows. The more we talk about our joy and happiness. And in last week's session, if you listen to it, I really laid in heavy about prayers of gratitude. I got some blowback from that, from people that don't want to let go and be happy. They're married to their misery. And I mean, nod your head if you know people like that. It's a process, right? It's a process. And so what I generate today, I don't always feel as enthusiastic as I come across, but I feel that if I can share 1/10 of what I really believe so that you can believe it with me, you will find it. Because I really am, this is coming true for me. And it might be because I've just spent 5 hours reading it, and now I'm feeling like a sugar deficit or something. But honestly, I feel every time I do this so much more connected to my higher power. And I promise you, if you spend the time with these paragraphs, they're not long, and go back and listen to this and mark up this is what I'm doing. I'm highlighting my little red book with the key ideas. And then the things that resonate with me from the studying I'm doing, I've written in the margins. So everything you've just heard has been what's come to me in the last 4 hours of sitting with this stuff. And from the materials and Gary's experience of all these years teaching this stuff. The best thing is we can now process this and add our part to the story. And in closing, all I want to say is I want to be the voice of happiness. And there are times where I have to share my innermost feelings that aren't up, but this stuff makes me happy because I see it's working, and we can spread that too. So that's it.